Hello and welcome to this next new fresh chapter on demography. Let us start this new chapter with a simple quote that do not study until you get it right. You have to study until there is no scope of errors or you cannot get it wrong. There are a lot of concepts you need to know in this chapter on demography. So let us start on this chapter, demography for your MCQ exams. Demography, demios, it comes from a Greek word that is demios. Demios means the population. And graphy, on the other hand, it means to study. So, what makes you study demography? What's the use of this concept of demography? See, as you grow in administration, let us say you become the health minister, you become the prime minister, you become the district collector, or you become director of health services, there might be many decisions that you will have to take on a population level. In very simple words, let us say you want to open a new medical college, or let us say you want to start a new vaccine campaign. So, how many total vaccines you will require? Will that be dependent on the population today? No, because your vaccine program may be implemented after 4 5 years. So technically, you should know how much population is going to grow after 4 5 years. If you're opening a new medical college, will it be open just this year or next year? Of course not. It may be available for the population after 7 10 years. So technically, you should be knowing that which area may be growing more, what is the population which you are tackling. So, on this basis, if you just see this global population, can you believe that the global population in year 1800, which is just 200 plus years from today, so 1800 year, we were hovering around 1 billion population. And can you imagine that world took around 1800, more than 1800, of course, because there is before Christ, but the world has taken 1800, at least 1800 years to reach 1 billion, and the world has taken only 200 plus years to reach a landmark of 8 billion. Last year, 2021, the global population was recorded as 7.9 billion. So the population is increasing. If you just look at the Indian population, you go to this website, the worldometers.info /watch/world population. You just see the world population, you just see the Indian population, you'll see that how the clock is ticking. If you talk about the population in India, you need to know that the current population that we are tackling in our country is around 138 crore population, and it is estimated by year 2060 to reach a landmark of 160 crore population, after which it may decline or it may increase. That is all projections. But for now, your a small point that I'll be using it again in my videos is that the total population that we are tackling in our country is 130 crore population. So that was just a brief introduction. What are the topics you're going to study for your exam? For your exam, we have divided this whole chapter into 4 categories. We will talk about the demographic cycle, the demographic trends and variables. We will talk about the fertility indicators and some of the survey techniques and questions from death certificate. So let us start with your topic number 1, that what is the demographic cycle. If you look at the demographic cycle, just you need to look at me that let us say that this pen on my right hand, it's a birth rate. And just imagine that this pen on my left hand, it's a death rate. So whenever a nation is born, whenever a country is there, it is always going to have a high birth rate and a high death rate. Why do you think a country will have a high birth rate? See, India got independent in 1947. So there was a country which was newly formulated. Of course, we had a high birth rate and a high death rate. My question is, why do we get a high birth rate? There is a huge number of reproductions. There is huge number of fertilities because people die. Because there is a high death rate. Because people die, people reproduce more. So why do people die? They die because there is so much reproduction. In simple words, I want to say that high birth rate causes high death rate and high death rate causes high birth rate. That's how the things go. So now as the country will progress or advance somewhere in the economic development, there is social development, people start getting better and educated and more literate. You open more medical colleges, more hospitals. So what's easy for us to decline? Like high birth rate, high death rate. What will decline first? Will it be the birth rate or will it be the death rate? I think your answer should be it is the death rate which declines first. It's difficult to decline the birth rate because declining the birth rate would actually involve maybe changing the thinking of the population. So the death rate is easy to decline. You open more medical colleges, of course, more hospitals, more doctors means the death rate will decline. So you have a high birth rate, high death rate. At the first level, the death rate, please note, the death rate will start declining. What happens to the birth rate? The birth rate is still high. Then slowly the country will develop, the people will learn more, get more educated. So your high birth rate, high death rate declines, and then slowly the birth rate also starts declining. They both keep on declining for many, many years. But theoretically, the birth rate can keep on declining, but death rate will have a minimum limit. People who come on this earth, they have to go. So death rate cannot be theoretically zero. There will be some minimum number. So the death rate reaches that minimum landmark, but the birth rate theoretically can be zero also. Theoretically, it can be zero also. So therefore, that is what is the demographic cycle, that you have the high birth rate, high death rate. The birth rate is high, the death rate is high, the death rate declines, the birth rate decline. They both will decline for a long time. And now the death rate has reached a minimum number and the birth rate will keep on declining. Let me translate this image onto the screen right now. So if you just look at the birth rate, let us say this green color thing is the birth rate, and let us draw a death rate also in a different color. So you have a high birth rate and a high death rate. The birth rate is high and the death rate is also high. In the first phase, in the next phase, the birth rate will be still high, but the death rate, you remember, will start declining. Then slowly in the next phase. Now the hallmark is that the birth rate will also start declining, right? And the death rate will keep on declining, but at a kind of slower pace. And then you have the decline in birth rate and the death rate. They both will decline for a long time. And now the birth rate cannot decline any further. This is the lowest limit it can reach, right? So it cannot decline, like from this point, it has decreased to this point. Okay, it cannot decline any further, but the birth rate will keep on declining, and for many years, it may even cross the death rate. This, what you see, is what is the demographic cycle. So if I just draw this demographic cycle, again, like what are the phases? This is called as phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and phase 5 of the demographic cycle. First MCQ, what are the names of these? First MCQ, what are the names of this? The first phase is called as high stationary. The first phase is called as high stationary. The second phase is called as early expanding. The second phase is called as early expanding. The third phase is called as late expanding. Please note, both are expanding. The third phase is called as late expanding. Stage 4, it is called as low stationary. Stage 4 is called as low stationary, and stage 5 is known as declining phase. So what are the 5 phases of demographic cycle? You have high stationary, early expanding, late expanding, low stationary, and declining stage. Let us look at the MCQs now, which examiner may ask you on this. So what you can do is you can make a single summary table, right? So you can make a single summary table like this, in which you can draw the birth rates, the death rates, the demographic gap. DG will stand for the demographic gap. And in the next column, we will talk about the population, and lastly, we will talk about the remarks. So you can make a single summary table, where in the end, you will be able to revise everything in a very short time. So let us talk about the first columns now. So you have these stages, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. First MCQ, I think we have already done, like what are the names? You already know that first stage is called as high stationary. Stage 2 is called as early expanding. Stage 3 is late expanding. Stage 4 is low stationary. And stage 5, it is declining stage, right? What happens to the birth rate and to the death rate? If you look at the screen, in the first phase, the birth rate is high. The death rate is also high. No MCQ. In the second phase, the birth rate is high, but MCQ start coming now, that in the second phase, the death rate will start declining. Please note, focus on the word start. The death rate would start declining in which stage? The death rate will start declining in stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What do you want to write? It is stage 2. The hallmark for a country to enter into stage 3. The hallmark for a country to enter into stage 3, that is a decline in the birth rate. So birth rate will start declining. Please write it. The birth rate will start declining in stage 3. Please note, the death rate will start declining in stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, stage 2. The birth rate will start declining in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, stage 3. Please note, these are important MCQs. Nothing very special about the death rate in stage 3. It is a slow decline. Nothing, no MCQ. What happens to the birth rate and death rate in stage 4? Nothing, no MCQ. Birth rate is slow decline and the death rate is also a slow decline. So there is slow declining of the birth rate and the death rate. What happens in stage 5? Another MCQ now. So in stage 5, the birth rate is a slow declining, no MCQ as such, but please note that the death rate is very low or stable. The death rate is very low or stable. I would like you to write it somewhere in the remark section, right? You had the remark section. Please note, write it in the remark section that for the first time, the birth rate may even be lesser than the death rate. Please note that the birth rate is always higher than the death rate, except it can be lower than the death rate in stage 5. So you need to remember this, that what happens to the birth rate and death rate in each of the stages. This is a 3 by 5 star MCQ topic, frequently asked question. Please note that the birth rate may be less than the death rate. Moving over to the next aspect. What is this about the demographic gap? So what is this you have written here, beta? What is this? This is the demographic gap. So let's try to see what is this demographic gap. Demographic gap, DG, demographic gap. Demographic gap is nothing but a gap. It is the difference between what? Between the birth rate and the death rate. It is the difference between the birth rate and the death. It's a gap. So you can just see that it is the birth rate minus death rate. Now, if you understand the images, the cycle that you had seen right now, if you understand the cycle, the difference between the birth rate and the death rate, that is what is demographic gap. Can you think and tell me that demographic gap will start increase in which stage? Stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What's your answer? The demographic gap, please note beta, will start increasing will start increasing in stage 2. Hai na? First stage is high birth rate, high death rate. The demographic gap is going to be stable. In the next phase, the demographic gap is going to increase. Because why? Not because the birth rate is higher or lower. It is because the death rate will start declining. So the demographic gap will increase. When will demographic gap, next MCQ, will start decreasing? Please note that in first phase, the demographic gap was stable. In the second phase, the demographic gap start increasing. In the third phase, now the country will start developing more education and literacy and the birth rate will decline. So that is the hallmark, that if a country declines the birth rate, what will happen to the increasing demographic gap? The gap starts decreasing. Please note, the demographic gap will start decreasing in stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What's your answer? It is in stage 3. Can you remember that? So I think now it is easy for me to ask you that when does the demographic gap is minimum? Can you see that it is minimum in which part? It is minimum in this stage. Why it is minimum? Because at the end of the stage 5, somewhere the birth rate or the death rate might even be equal. So the DG may even be 0, or the birth rate may be lesser than the death rate, where the demographic gap will reverse. है ना? So demographic gap is highest when? So I asked you a question, it is minimum when? Minimum in the stage 5. Next MCQ is highest when? When can demographic gap be highest? See, you remember in stage 1, it is a stable birth rate and a death rate. So the demographic gap is stable. In stage 2, now the death rate declines, the demographic gap will start increasing. In stage 3, the birth rate will decline, so the demographic gap will start decreasing. So common sense, when is it highest? It is highest just before the country will enter into stage 3. So it is highest when? Just at the end of stage 2. towards the end of stage 2, the demographic gap may be maximum. Are you getting it? So what do you want to write for your exam, beta? Let's write it down for your exams now. What is demographic gap? Demographic gap is the difference between the birth rate and the death rate. When is the demographic gap start? Focus on the word start. When does the demographic gap start increasing? It start increasing in, what did we learn? Stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is in stage 2. What is the reason for a demographic gap to increase in stage 2? It is a decline in the death rate. Next MCQ, when does the demographic gap start? Focus on the word start. Start decreasing. Focus on the word start. And answer is, demographic gap will start decreasing in stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What do you want to answer? Stage 3. What's the reason for decline in the demographic gap? Is it high birth rate, high death rate, low birth rate, low death rate? Definitely, I think you got it right. The hallmark is a decline in the birth rate. Next MCQ examiner will like to ask you, what is the demographic, when is the demographic gap maximum? Common sense, it is maximum towards the end of stage 2. It is so simple to understand. And when is it maximum? When is it minimum? It is minimum. When is it minimum? It is minimum towards the late part of stage 5. That's what it is. So it is minimum towards the late part of stage 5. It is negative. It is minimum towards the late part of stage 5. That is what is the things you need to remember in demographic gap. Let's write down for your exam. What happens to the demographic gap in stage 1? Nothing very special. It is a stable demographic gap. Nothing, no increase, no decrease. In stage 2, the demographic gap will start increasing. The demographic gap will start increasing. What happens in stage 3? It will start decreasing. Nothing happens in stage 4. Common sense, no MCQ. It is a stable demographic gap. In stage 5, it is minimum. It is minimum. It is lowest. It is negative in stage 5. Can I ask you to write down where is the demographic gap maximum? It is maximum towards the end part of stage 2. It is maximum towards the end part of stage 2. So now, as you have learned about the demographic gap, let us talk about the population. It's very easy for you to understand if we talk about the population, that you just look at the cycle again. See, in the first phase, you had a high birth rate and you had a high death rate. So what happens to the population? Let us assume that this room is a country, and in this country you have 1,000 children coming in and 1,900, some number dying. So what will happen to the population? It's a high birth rate, high death rate. The population remains almost static. What happens to the population in stage 2? Now the death rate will decline. So 1,000 people are coming in, only 600-700 are dying. What will happen to the extra 300-400? They're going to stay in this population. So the population, the country population will start increasing. So what happens to the population in stage 2, in stage 3? In stage 3, please note the population will not start to decrease. In stage 3, now the birth rate also declines, but the death rate is also declining, right? So in this country, let us say there'll be 1,000 people there. So 1,000 coming in, 800-900 dying, that is stage 1. In stage 2, you have 1,000 coming in, but 600-700 dying. In stage 3, now you have only 600-700 coming in, but still 300-400 will die. So that extra amount of 200-300 population are still staying in the country. So technically that means that the population will increase. But mind it, listen carefully, that I want to say that the population rate of increase of the population in stage 2, rate of increase of the population in stage 2 is higher than the rate of increase of the population in stage 3. Did you get this point? So in both the stages 2 and 3, the population will increase, but the rate of increase in 3 is lesser than the rate of increase in stage 2. What will happen to the population in stage 4? In stage 4, please note that the population is again going to remain same because the birth rate is low, the death rate is low. Okay, and in stage 5, what will happen to the population? The birth rate will be lesser than the death rate. So there is a negative population. That is why we call this as declining. You remember what were the names of these stages? First stage is called as high stationary. Second stage is called as early expanding. Third is late expanding. fourth is low stationary, and fifth is declining. In fact, the names of this of these stages, that is what is the population. Anyways, for your exam, if I just draw the population over here, if I just draw the population on this curve, if you want, you can draw it in your copies also. But otherwise, it's very simple point that in stage 1, the population is almost same. In stage 2, it definitely increases. In stage 3, it does increase, but the rate is lesser than stage 2. In stage 4, it is a stable population. And in stage 5, it starts to decline. Are you getting it? So that's what happens to the population. So very simple MCQ, no brainers on this. Stage 1, it is a stable population. Stage 2, it shows explosive growth. This has been asked in many exams, multiple times it has been asked, frequently asked MCQ topic, that explosive growths are seen in stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they'll be seen in stage 2. There is a rapid growth of the population. In stage 3, there is increasing population, but the rate of increase in stage 2 is more than the rate of increase in stage 3. In stage 4, it is a stable population, and in stage 5, please note, it is a declining population. In stage 5, it is a declining population. So I think these are the things that you need to remember for making your summary table. So now moving over to the next part of this table, of making the summary table for you, which are the countries, what are the examples? There are very few countries which are in stage 1. There are some rural areas in Bangladesh. There are some countries in Western Africa, which are still in stage 1, like Niger. So Niger is a different country than Nigeria. Nigeria is more towards the coast in Africa, and Niger country, it's a separate country, and it is landlocked, and unfortunately Niger has been consistently showing the lowest development across the globe. So Niger, Somalia, some rural parts in Bangladesh, they are still in stage 1. Most of the world, no MCQ on stage 1, right? Most of the world is either in stage 2 or stage 3. Most of the developing countries, they are in stage 2 or in stage 3. Please note MCQ for you, India is in which stage? India is in stage 3. Most other developed countries like US, like Canada, UK, these countries actually started, they did not have a history. So they did not start with some native population. They actually started by building immigrants. So these countries are technically in stage 4. They are one of the ideal stages. They are in stage 4. Most of the developed countries, like for example, US, Canada, UK, they are in stage 4. In stage 5, very few countries. Example for these countries could be Italy. That is in stage 5. Japan is also known to be in stage 5. Norway. These are some of the countries, and some other countries, but these are some of the countries which have a declining population. That means the burden of the population is more, and the fertility rates or the birth rates are lesser than the death rates. So for the remark section, what are the things you need to remember? Please note that stage 2 and stage 3 are very frequently asked in your exam. If you talk about the stage 2, please, I think we have already written that in stage 2, please note that the demographic gap will start to increase. It start increasing in stage 2. It reaches a maximum in stage 2. There is rapid explosion of the population. There is rapid growth of the population. What happens to the population in stage 3, or what are the remarks or the MCQs which you can be expecting in stage 3? Please note that in stage 3, the demographic gap will start to decrease. And the hallmark for a country to enter into stage 3 is a decline in the birth rate. There is a growing population. I won't call it as a slow growing, because very soon you will see that what is a slow growing, moderate growing, rapid growing, but the population is growing. There is a growing population, and that's all about the stage 3. Stage 4, no special MCQs. It is the ideal stage for a country to be in, because the birth rates are low and the death rates are also low. In stage 5, We have already written that the birth rate is lesser than the death rate, and it is common sense a declining population. So now that was all that you need to remember for your MCQ exams. If you have written with me, we have written about the names, the birth rate, and the death rates. We have talked about the demographic gaps and the population. We have also talked about the examples and the remarks or the salient features that you need to know. So your total summary table should be beautiful looking summary table, and you will be able to revise it within 1 to 2 minutes. So, if you just recall what we have done till now, we have talked about the demographic cycle. Please note that in the stage 2, the population will increase. In stage 3, the population will again increase, but the rate of increase in population is higher in stage 2 compared to the rate of increase in stage 3. Please note that the demographic gap will start increasing in stage 2, demographic gap start decreasing in stage 3. It is highest in stage 2, it is lowest in stage 5. If the question says that there is high birth rate and a high death rate, that is stage 1. But if the question says that the birth rate is high but the death rate is low, what is this? This is stage 2. But if the question says that there is a decline, the birth rate will start declining in stage 3, but the death rate is also lower, that is stage 3. So stage 3 is a decline. You see a decline, rapid decline in birth rates with a slow decline in the death rates. If there is a slow decline of the birth rates, or the question says low birth rate and there is low death rate, answer is stage 4. And in stage 5, the birth rate will be lower than the death rate. So that's a very quick summary of the things that you need to remember for your exam. So with that, I'd like to thank you so much for watching this module. In the next module, we are going to talk about the demographic trends and the variables.